Hello, everybody.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the last deep dive webinar.
Can you believe it?
We're just letting a few more people come in. Okay. I think we're ready to go, Mick, anytime you're ready.
Fantastic. All right. Well, hello. Welcome, everybody. It's so lovely to see you all again. I'm kind of sad. This is our last deep dive that we're going to be catching up on together. I'm going to try to make it a doozy for you and make the most of your final evening you're giving out to develop yourself in this very important way. And if you haven't gathered already, what we're going to be talking about is a really critical but often overlooked and perhaps misunderstood behavioral competency of assertiveness. Sorry for a sec, we'll just bring my Zoom window up again. Okay, so this is going to be, we're going to try to make this interactive as well. And in fact, we're going to roll into a poll. So if you can have your a secondary device, perhaps your phone, ready to go, or at least be ready to open a secondary browser window, that'd be fantastic. I may ask you to chime in the chat box from time to time as well. So please do so. And we're probably going to have a breakout in the middle there as well. So just be prepared for those. But let's kick things off with a little bit of a poll. I'll just bring this up. Kathy, if you can just, Denise and Kathy, if you could just give me a thumbs up that you can see that.
Yep.
Fantastic. All right, folks. Just use that QR code if you do have a phone on hand, or perhaps you might want to open another browser window and type in menti.com 49031144. We're going to do a little bit of a poll to help me understand where everybody's at when it comes to this topic of assertiveness. And while you're doing that, I am going to pause my screen share and shift over to our poll. Okay, so hopefully you can see that poll now. Denise, can you just confirm that for me?
Yep.
Fantastic. All right. You're getting into it already, which is fantastic. The first one is asking you, do you find it hard to say no to your colleagues when they ask for assistance or offload a task to you, even when your plate is full? Yes or no? Pretty convincing result there with 91%. Okay, that's really interesting. Let me just advance this poll. Thank you. Next slide. Let's try this one. I rarely tell a colleague that their behavior upsets me for fear of how they may react. Give it a second to populate. Okay. Sort of hovering between around about 55 to 65% of people saying yes. Great to see a bigger proportion prepared to have those courageous conversations, but they're not easy, right? Let's look at this one. I don't like to challenge ideas in team meetings or maybe even present my own because it's easier not to rock the boat. Slightly different angle here. Give it a second to populate. Majority of you disagreeing with that one, which is fantastic, but not everybody, right? So it's really important to bear this in mind. Sometimes even that can be very challenging, expressing our own idea, particularly depending on the makeup of our team as well. Sometimes we get drowned out by more assertive people. When a colleague complains to me about another team member, I listen and advise more than defending that person in their absence. Assuming this has happened to you. Okay. So the majority of us taking that slightly more supportive approach for the person that's actually expressing their concerns. But definitely one or two of you who are taking a slightly different approach there, maybe more of an assertive approach. Okay, next one. When a colleague or a manager explains something and I don't understand, I will often pretend otherwise so I don't look stupid. Anybody relate to this one? Okay, just about 50-50. Great. Thank you. Those that said yes, thank you for your honesty. All right, next one. I have previously or would be comfortable to calmly let a client know that their behavior is unacceptable. And I'm hoping some of you are training today has helped you on this front. Fantastic. Okay, so maybe about 3/4 at yes, 1/4, or maybe a bit closer to 20% at a no. Okay, well, look, it's a skill that needs to be practiced and developed, and hopefully we've given you some great frameworks for that. For those of you that still aren't comfortable. If a colleague has lettuce stuck in their teeth after lunch, I let them know immediately. It's your last one. A bit of fun there. And it does relate to assertiveness, believe it or not. Okay, fantastic. You're lovely people. That's really great. Sometimes that changes, right, depending on how familiar we are with the person. Okay, thank you very much. That is really, really helpful for me. I'm just going to swap the share over here. But it gives me a really good idea of where everybody that's tuned in right now are at when it comes to assertiveness. Denise, hopefully you can see that slide once again. Great, fantastic.
I still see the last question, number 7.
Number 7. Okay. Can you see it now? Okay, yeah. Fantastic. Okay, so if you answered yes to any or some of the above, there is a possibility that you, along with roughly 80 to 85% of veterinary professionals out there, have a propensity for being a little bit too nice in a practice setting. Or, reframed in a less ambiguous way, you have a tendency towards people-pleasing and or peacekeeping interactions. More specifically, these statements above can be distilled into 4 key behavioral signs that you may be a little too nice professionally, which are, and I'd like you to type a yes or no into the chat box for each of these if you can relate at least some of the time, all right? But the first one is difficulty saying no. If you find yourself constantly agreeing to additional tasks and responsibilities, even when you've already been overwhelmed, that's a fairly common one. Just give us a yes or no in the chat box. Maybe, Denise, you can keep me posted on those. Mm-hmm. The next one is avoiding conflict. If you frequently avoid addressing issues or confronting colleagues or clients to maintain harmony, that may be a sign that you're perhaps being a little too nice.
There's quite a few yeses, a couple no's.
Okay, fantastic. Sort of almost reflecting some of the earlier polling. The next niceness behavior that is fairly prevalent is seeking approval, continuously seeking validation and approval from others rather than trusting your own judgment. And then the final one, suppressing opinions. If you often suppress your own opinions and ideas in meetings or decision-making moments to avoid disagreement. So what are the sort of ratio of yeses and nos there?
Mm-hmm. A couple of yeses.
Okay, fantastic. Let's explore this a little bit more. So what exactly do I mean by being too nice? Because I bet some of you right now might be thinking, hang on a second, isn't being nice a good thing? Something we should all be aspiring to, being known as a nice person. And the answer is, it actually all depends on your motivation. And to help explain what I mean, the definition of niceness I want you to consider is this. A nice person typically refers to somebody who is friendly, outwardly kind and considerate to others. They're generally polite, pleasant to be around, and aim to maintain harmony with the people around them. These are all great qualities. However, it's important to note that being nice and being good are not always mutually inclusive. The difference lies in the underlying motivation of our actions. And according to Robert Bolton in his best-selling book, People Skills, the trouble is people that are nice are often motivated by deep-seated needs to avoid their own discomfort with conflict out of concerns for how they're being perceived. Being nice is often driven by a need to maintain security, and when that's the case, it comes with a hidden cost to either our own well-being and fulfillment or that of others. A good person, on the other hand, according to my definition at the very least, cares enough about their colleagues to have a courageous conversation when they're needed. They defend the absent. They speak their minds in meetings even when it upsets the status quo. Good people put their patients' discomfort before their own when it comes to the cost of quality care and maintain healthy boundaries too, having the courage to say no when their plate is full. So it's fair to say that niceness, or more specifically passiveness and people-pleasing behaviour, is quite prevalent in veterinary professionals. And our research into attrition, both in 2018 and 2021, as well as extensive work on social styles in veterinary teams, would attest to this. As to exactly why nice people are drawn to the veterinary profession, there doesn't seem to be a definitive body of research to explain the link. Literature does exist, however, that supports the hypothesis that challenging experiences in formative years could be the common thread. Numerous published research papers demonstrate positive correlations between adverse childhood events and, firstly, higher rates of acquiring deep affinity for companion animals, but also a greater motivation for choosing a helping career. And finally, a much higher likelihood of experiencing greater levels of human-to-human empathic concern in adulthood. Now, I've got to stress this is a hypothesis from me only, and I'm not for a minute suggesting that we are all knowingly products of adverse childhood events, but it represents food for thought. Worthy, no doubt, of at least some industry-specific research as it's received in other professions. And I would caveat that there are no doubt positive formative experiences shaping our traits and path also, as existed for me. It was a bit of both, to be honest. But whatever the root drivers of so much niceness coming into the profession might be, it certainly can help to explore the predominant personality traits of veterinary professionals to better understand the prevalence of niceness. Now, by now, I'm sure you're more than familiar with social styles. And when we reflect on social styles, if we combine expressive and amiable veterinary professionals, a small majority, 50 to 55%, are relationship oriented and feel a strong need to be liked, often driven by a subconscious fear of rejection. As a consequence, they tend to have higher levels of empathy and a tendency towards people-pleasing behaviour. And if we combine analytics and amiables, the vast majority, 80 to 85%, tend to be less assertive and more thoughtful on the continuum, and as a result, typically have strong aversion to conflict and display more of a passive approach to interactions as a consequence. These are, of course, there are always, of course, exceptions to the rule, but typically it's these deep psychological drivers of those drawn to the profession that results on the level of niceness that we see. And as you can imagine, just being a nice person rather than a good person, according to the definition I gave you earlier, can seem like a path of least resistance. However, it brings with it a lot of downsides. Firstly, avoiding conflict isn't healthy for us. It's been demonstrated in 2019 research that repressing emotions actually affects our physical health as well as our psychological well-being, with strong correlations to rates of physiological disorders known to be triggered by stress. People who are just nice have also been shown in research to be more likely to experience emotional exhaustion and burnout. For a working example of this connection, let's look at what we've learned about the importance of mindset, patient advocacy, and confident communicating and demonstrating the value of our recommendations and the ultimate service that we provide. As we all know, negative interactions with angry and emotional clients, usually in the form of emotional barbs around the cost of our care and our motivations, can take a toll on our emotional well-being. And our research shows us that these negative interactions are magnified when we take the conflict avoidant, people-pleasing approach, both in their frequency as well as their impact. And according to our 2021 sustainability survey, for the average veterinarian out there, this is happening at least once a week. Furthermore, the AVA Veterinary Wellness Report, a really amazing report that was done in the Southern Hemisphere, showed that challenging client interactions was the #1 psychosocial risk factor for veterinarians. In 2022, a research article published in the Veterinary Record examined the experience of more than 250 veterinary team members, including veterinarians, nurses, and support staff. And the results indicated that instances of client incivility, such as verbal abuse and disrespect, were linked to burnout and symptoms of depression or anxiety among the veterinary team. Interestingly, this correlation was attributed to the concept of something called emotional labor, common in client-facing industries where team members are expected to display positive emotions while suppressing their own negative feelings, contributing further to poor well-being and burnout. You can see how a worsening cycle could occur. The next one on the list, unsatisfactory professional outcomes. What I can share based on decades of personality profiling with veterinary professionals, both as a business owner and in the leadership development work we do at Lincoln is that conflict avoidance and the need to be liked that runs deep in so many veterinarians can play a big role in patient and professional outcomes. These deep psychological drivers increase our propensity to feel discomfort recommending and discussing more costly treatment plans, as well as pricing and charging appropriately for the work that we do, resulting in the behaviours we've previously discussed in the very, very first deep dive webinar. Seems a long time ago, such as corner cutting, option swamping, mercy billing, discounting. The net result being lower quality patient care and outcomes, reduced professional satisfaction, and higher rates of complaints. It also results in insufficient remuneration. Being nice doesn't just pose a foundational role in limiting the commercial sustainability of paying us what we're really worth. It's also been shown that aversion to conflict inhibits many of us from wanting to negotiate for better pay and conditions. As you can see in this slide from our 2021 sustainability survey, it's the minority of veterinarians that felt they were being paid what they're worth, and only a similar small proportion feeling confident in negotiating pay and working conditions. It's worth noting for those that didn't feel confident, as evident in the commentary and echoed in other research into veterinary remuneration, the lack of confidence was largely underpinned by their recognition of a fear of conflict more so than a deficiency in negotiating skills themselves, although no doubt both are playing a role. The next one's inadequate leadership. As we teach at Lincoln, by virtue of having a veterinary degree, we're leaders from the moment we step foot in a veterinary practice. We can't get what we need done in the course of a day without the support of the team around us, and as you know, that requires leadership. Same applies when we step into positions of responsibility. We simply can't have the impact we desire without the ability to positively influence others. When we're focused on avoiding conflict and people pleasing, we can tend towards one of two ineffective leadership styles. You know this for quadrant module already, but quadrant 2 is where we avoid and abdicate. It's where we bury our head in the sand and allow issues to fester and magnify. And Q3 is socialize and pacify. It's also a common place within the industry, especially veterinarians that have been promoted into management positions. And this is very much just this, let's just all be friends, I don't want to rock the boat attitude. And it's done, of course, with really high regard for people. However, it also leaves ambiguity around the rules of the organization. If these aren't clearly defined and reinforced by the leader or leaders, then the team will simply make up their own rule book and little progress is ever made towards goals. And the net result of these very common leadership styles can be a toxic workplace culture and a team that never really reaches optimum performance. And the last one on this list is poor workplace relationships. So if we park leadership to one side, it's important to note that conflict avoidance isn't good for our interpersonal relationships with colleagues in the workplace either. A 2018 study on workplace incivility published in the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology found that avoiding conflict with colleagues doesn't stop friction from reoccurring in the workplace. Plus, avoidance, being a form of emotional repression, also led to increased emotional exhaustion. The secret is learning to be more assertive with our colleagues, but doing so in an emotionally intelligent way, which we'll come to later in this presentation. But simply put, there is just so much to be gained by letting go of our need just to be nice and learning to be more assertive instead. Being assertive is the key quality that allows veterinary professionals to move from being just nice to being good. And a great definition I have for you is this: courageously communicating our own point of view or priority while maintaining consideration for the opinion and feelings of others. Okay, there's something else I want to share with you here. There's an important distinction to make between assertiveness and aggression. That being the latter is making our point without considering the needs, feelings, and opinions of others. It's demonstrated brilliantly here in another concept we teach at Lincoln called the negotiation or the I win, you lose matrix. This can be overt aggression with direct communication that often demands, attacks, humiliates others in a direct and destructive I win, you lose style. And it can also be passive aggressive, where we act out aggressive impulses in an indirect way, often make our point through sarcasm, behavior, or words spoken behind the backs of others. More of a I lose, you lose scenario, and equally destructive. Being assertive shows that you respect yourself because you're willing to stand up for your interests and express your thoughts and feelings. It also demonstrates that you're aware of others' rights and that you're willing to work on resolving conflicts, creating an I win, you win situation. But the benefits aren't just limited to better interpersonal interactions and more professional satisfaction. On the basis of the role it can play in supporting happier, healthier, and more fulfilling careers, we should really look at assertiveness as a core communication skill to develop due to its ability to boost your self-esteem and reduce workplace stress. Conversely to the downsides of niceness mentioned earlier, assertiveness can bring with it better physical and mental health, superior patient outcomes, better remuneration, enhanced leadership, and a healthier team culture. It also allows you to experience deeper relationships with colleagues and clients alike, founded on mutual respect. Clear boundaries created and reinforced through assertiveness will also serve as a foundation of more trust in interactions and preserving a better balance at work. In the top context of clients, being direct and respectful with assertive communication helps ensure successful delivery of messages as well. A great example is the way in which assertive veterinarians make recommendations, moving away from the vague inferential language tied to conflict aversion and assertively providing clients the expert guidance on the best healthcare path forward that they came to you and paid you for. And a final and incredibly powerful benefit of practicing this skill of assertiveness is that it can contribute to your sense of psychological safety and sense of control. Meaning, when you're more assertive, you'll voice your opinion more in team meetings or decision-making processes. Having your perspective heard can make you feel valued, respected, and that you are directly contributing to the direction of the business, all powerful motivators when it comes to engagement at work. All right, so Denise, have you got our breakout rooms ready to go?
Just about.
So folks, what we're going to do while Denise just puts those finishing touches on, I'm going to get you to do a brief reflection activity. So we're going to send you into breakout pairs just for a 5-minute session. And what I'd like you to do is just take turns sharing your perspective on assertiveness versus people-pleasing and conflict avoidance in your practice. Do you see it in yourself? Do you see it in others? Do you or they experience any positive or negative outcomes as a result? So, Denise, I'm ready for you to send people off when you are, and just if you could remember, if you are in a position to turn your camera on, that'd be great. Make sure you're unmuted as you go in, and don't forget to select I accept on the invite to go into the breakout room.
Okay.
Have a great chat.
To go right now.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a great chat. Just wondering if anyone had a lightning fast light bulb moment or a great conversation with somebody that resonated with you. Anybody brave enough to unmute and share or type into the chat box? Kathy, I'm going to... Oh, hang on. Kathy, I'm going to pick on you.
Here I was just grabbing a drink of water and looking out the window, and it's snowing. I am in BC. It's beautiful. I think one of the things we talked about was how in the moment you kind of respond to your default.
Yes.
So, and then afterwards you think, oh, I should have said this or could have said that. And on that reflection piece, maybe it comes with practice and time, that you'll pause in the moment and think, okay, this is how I'm going to respond, rather than maybe going to default being nice. I'll think about expressing the assertiveness. That was something that one of the folks shared in the group that I was with, and the folks that I shared the breakout room with. If I have misrepresented, or if you want to add something else, please do so.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, it's probably good timing to talk about some refinements, perhaps, for some of you to your strategies on being assertive. So that's really what this second half is all about. And Kathy, it's really great that your group spoke about the importance of getting set for an assertive moment and preparing yourself and your mindset. And sometimes, do you know what? You were taken by such surprise in a moment that might be worthy of a courageous conversation, it's not even appropriate to respond right there and then. And at Lincoln, we talk about retreating to the ground of your choosing so that you can reset, reflect, and have a courageous conversation once you're self-regulated. You've had a moment to gather your thoughts. So It's okay, you know, not necessarily to have to do it in every single moment, depending on the circumstances. But let's jump in to some strategy, because hopefully this is going to be very helpful. Okay, so we've covered all the reasons why we should try to move away from being nice to being good. Hopefully you understand what I'm getting at there in a veterinary setting. But what are some strategies for those of us stuck in at least a degree of people pleasing and conflict avoidance that we can use to become more assertive in a typical day? And I have so many to share with you, and I have to be careful on time. So I'm going to zero in on option B that you can see on the screen here, being creating healthy boundaries with colleagues. But this equally applies to your personal life as well. Because another amazing opportunity for you to practice assertiveness sits amongst the numerous day-to-day interactions that you have with your teammates in what's often a demanding pressure cooker work environment. And really what we're referring to here is opportunities for creating not just healthier boundaries, but better relationships. So scenario one, perhaps you're mulling over a colleague impacting you and others. Let's consider a scenario where you're being negatively impacted by a teammate. It's happened more than once. You're in two minds over whether to speak to them about it. This is really bothering you, but you're not sure it's worth the risk of upsetting them or creating conflict. The first assertiveness strategy that I've got for you here, once again, is all about creating the impetus to act. We need to value the other person enough to become more assertive ourselves. Think about that framing. This first step is about creating motivation to take the courageous path instead of the comfortable. When you really value someone, put that person above any potential negative short-term perception of you. What I mean here is the best way to shift your mindset on addressing the issue is to reframe a potential difficult conversation as valuing them and the broader team enough to be honest with them. I hope that makes sense to you. You see, really valuing someone is not about articulating why you appreciate them. Just that alone. It also requires being brutally honest about the behavior sometimes, helping them with their self-awareness and providing them with the opportunities for growth. So when reframing the potential interaction in this way, it's natural to be motivated by self-interest. That's the opportunity to positively influence their behavior in a way that will bring healthier workplace interactions for you, but also the rest of the team for the longer term. Equally as powerful, though, is when we're feeling this fear or discomfort coming up about delivering this developmental feedback to them. We can also be fueled by the knowledge that this honesty might allow them to experience better personal and professional relationships over the longer term. And get this, the beauty is, as you practice more, your belief in the value that the assertiveness brings will grow also, and with it, your motivation to take that courageous path more readily. So, along the lines of what Kathy was referring to. The next scenario we're going to take a look at is a classic one, I think, in the course of a working day, certainly in my experience in practice, was requests for assistance that may be coming at you when you're already at capacity. It's a great example at the very least. Like all skills, assertiveness can take time to develop. To build your confidence, it can help to practice these small steps. One great example is learning to say no more often. In the hectic work environment of veterinary practice, one of the biggest challenges to us managing our time effectively is unexpected pulls on our time. Now, this might be as simple as, Jenny, do you mind drawing the bloods from Otto? He's second on the surgery list and it needed to happen 15 minutes ago. We're often our own worst enemy here, right? Because of our generous nature and our desire to not let others down, including our patients, we tend to default to a yes. The trouble is these unexpected additions to our list in the day when we're already at capacity means it will come at a cost somewhere. Invariably, that's a knock-on effect to us being more stressed and caught back at work for an hour or so after our shift finishes, perhaps, when we should be prioritizing our self-care instead. Given how challenging this small step in assertiveness can still be for many of us, I'll share with you my top 10 tips for getting better at artfully setting boundaries and saying no. And these include tip 1, you can see it on your screen there, be clear of what's on your plate. Before you say anything, as we teach in Leading Edge, having a clear understanding of your schedule for the day and any additional tasks on your list is critical, not just to your own time management, but also it's a prerequisite for a decisive response. Tip 2, next, then get clear in your mind if saying yes is even possible without compromising your well-being or that of other patients and clients you need to provide prompt care to. Conversely, consider if a patient or a person's immediate well-being is at risk. Remember, we're not creating boundaries. Sorry, we are trying to create healthy boundaries here, not being recklessly obstructive. Tip 3, the answer to the internal questions posed in step 2, if they are no, then resolve to match that conclusion with your response to them. Tip 4, begin by taking a breath. If you're already feeling overwhelmed, great advice there in Kathy's group. And remember, an emotional reaction from you in the moment here is being reactive, not assertive, and it will likely have a negative effect. It can also later lead to you to feel guilt and the need to apologize and acquiesce to this original request out of guilt, right? Tip 5, the idea here is that you want to provide a calm, decisive, succinct, and consistent response that starts with the word no. We also need to avoid being vague or indecisive in any way in our response. Language like, I don't think I can, maybe I can if I get through this, suggests that you can be persuaded to a yes with more pressure. Also, we've got to aim to demonstrate empathy, but don't be overly apologetic. This is a big part of step 7. Tip 7, we need to try to break the habit of using words like I'm sorry or I feel terrible up front in these situations. Given what's on your plate, it's a reasonable response, nothing to feel guilty about. Also, being overly apologetic undermines your assertiveness. It is more helpful to convey empathy with words like, no, unfortunately, I can't help you right now. Tip 8, resist the temptation to then provide an expansive justification on your position, as it can weaken your boundary also. You might choose to add a brief explanation, perhaps, if the reason's not immediately apparent. That might be appropriate, but keep it brief, reasonable, and unbreakable. For example, you can see it there on your screen. I'm at capacity at the moment with my own case management right now. Okay, so tip 9, if it's applicable, you can reinforce your concern for their needs by proffering a potential solution with the addition of, here's an example, perhaps try Stacey, who's on a floater shift this morning. You're directing them somewhere else. You're trying to be helpful in some sort of way. This can help burn off any guilt that you might still feel and demonstrates an authentic desire to support them in some way. And tip 10, finally, as you've learned in communication modules in Leading Edge, it's critical our nonverbal communication is congruent. Trying to avoid conveying guilt, irritation, or overwhelm, even if you might be feeling it. Far better to make deliberate eye contact, demonstrate your resoluteness, and perhaps radiate genuine empathy for them with your facial expressions and body language. Failure to do so can completely undermine the assertive and reasonable boundary that you're trying to set. So there's a great framework for you to follow and a great opportunity to practice assertiveness if you struggle saying no. You're going to get plenty of opportunities as you go back into practice. Scenario 3, though, that we're going to wrap on is an even more powerful one and probably more nuanced to master the art of. So what about challenging conversations, addressing an issue with somebody? When doing so with the aim of creating positive change, this is technically described as developmental feedback. And at Lincoln, we also call these courageous conversations. Now, let's imagine a scenario where someone's repeatedly spoken to you abruptly and sarcastically, and now it's happened again in front of the team. We're going to assume you've already generously given them the benefit of the doubt on previous occasions, mindful that everybody has a bad day every now and then. We often shy away from these potentially challenging conversations with colleagues or clients because of 2 things. 1, fear of how they're going to react, and 2, a lack of confidence on how to deliver it. Well, as I mentioned earlier, as a first step, we can fuel our motivation and overcome that fear by first being personally clear in our intention, valuing the other person's professional and personal experience enough, as well as our own and the team's experience, to then choose the courageous path over the comfortable. Equally as important, though, we can fuel our courage in being assertive by building our confidence. We can literally implement proven techniques which will improve our results in these more challenging conversations when we're delivering developmental feedback, and this builds our confidence. When we handle these conversations with more confidence, we tend to see better outcomes as well as a result, so you can see how a virtuous cycle can be created. One such technique for mastering the art of delivering feedback that we teach at Lincoln is called the SBII framework. These are there are 3 initial steps in this framework as indicated by the initials. The first is S for situation. This is the step where you provide the context. We need to be as specific as possible about the situation in which the behavior you want addressed occurred. An example would be, this morning at around 11 o'clock, I came through to the treatment room and asked you if my vomiting dog had its fluids administered yet. You were scrubbing for surgery and responded with words to the effect of, no, we haven't. If you hadn't noticed, we're under the pump here. Keep it factual, non-judgmental. The next is behavior, B for behavior. In this step, we want to describe the observable behavior. We want to keep it just sticking to the facts here and avoid subjectivity or judgment. A great example might be, you responded abruptly with a raised voice in front of the rest of the team. If we want to keep this conversation constructive, we need to remain truly. We need to resist the temptation to insert an opinion like, you seemed defensive and unhelpful at the time.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.